Today we are painting one of the Welsh landscapes inspired by William Turner and his visits to North Wales. Love the location, and I thought we can work quite large and maybe quite quick with the sponge, painting some of the Snowdon Mountains, one of the valleys, Penw Pass, with some of the flooded rivers there. I'll look for some of the gorgeous greens and reds and violets to create a beautiful atmosphere, as if we were Turners. Okay. We'll also need today one of our wooden wedges. So if you've got a sponge close by, and maybe one of the wooden wedges or something we can do some textures with, that will be brilliant. And I have an A2 paper here. It's quite large. So I'll sketch my painting, the composition of my painting first, and then we'll do some practice on a separate paper afterwards. Okay. And we'll do elements. We'll practice the sky. We'll paint the sky on our painting. We'll practice some colors of the rock. So because it's quite a large piece, we'll practice different elements individually. Okay. All right. So I'll need my pencil and a rubber to get started on my composition sketch. Now, if I were to divide my painting where the horizon line is, so I'm putting it somewhere in between the mountains and the green part of the grasses, somewhere there. That takes me just a little bit less than halfway through my photograph. So if my photograph halfway through of it is going to be somewhere here, so that becomes a little bit lower. So let's find my halfway through on my paper to know how low I'll need to go for the horizon, here. Okay. Now I think I need to pick up slightly softer pencil so you can see my lines better, as I'm working on a larger piece of paper. From a distance, the camera doesn't quite pick it up. Okay, so that's my line of horizon. And I've got some stunning mountains. I'll work from the left corner, and I just work out a rough distance of where they're going to finish. There's some beautiful shapes, lovely triangular tops, but let's find the shape of them, kind of the last end of the valley here. How far from the horizon is going to be. There is another hill going from the other side. Okay, it might be overlapping even further in here. Maybe this mountain is going down, but there's something else at the back. So we've got a lovely V shape. It looks like some more further back mountains at the back. So now I know roughly that V shape. Now, in comparison to the end of the paper, my horizon and where the mountain peak is going to be, that's going to be probably halfway through all of this area. So that's probably have to stop somewhere here for me to have that majestic, gorgeous feel. Okay, I think that's going to be somewhere a bit lower. Now the mountain's got a characteristic character type of peaks, so we want to make them, they don't have to be identical. Nobody's going to be making geological discoveries based on our paintings. However, building up beautiful silhouettes are easier if we use some of that reference Okay, I think I'm gonna do it a bit more elegant line here. A bit more elegant sloping line, that's better. Okay. Actually, what I'm also discovering now, that my peak here from this little valley shape is, well, it's not in the center, so just double check. So if we were to have a halfway through the paper distance, maybe halfway through somewhere here, so the peak need to go a little bit more on the right. So I think I'm just about in that area, and I'm going to start going slightly higher. Okay, and once I've done the full length of my mountains, I can then double check and decide if that is, if I'm happy with that range, if that's enough. Okay, I think this one could be a bit more pronounced. Curve. And that diagonal line could be a bit more steeper. Okay. So I've started with an outline of my mountains. Now, what else I'm discovering here? The distance between the two peaks and the third peak by the left, looking too similar. I think I'll have to move this central one a bit more forward. If you haven't sketched it yet, measure it. If you have, check that that doesn't clash. Okay, that's good. Means that that section could go higher, a bit close here as well. No, it shouldn't be. I'll keep it where it is. It will be all going in the fog. I don't want this one to be too round. I want it to be more ridge-like. I think that's what it is, a bit of steps, almost horizontal steps. And then that ridge goes slightly up and then sharply down. So observing, observing, observing rather than making it up. And the diagonal lines here I'm looking at are from the tops of the mountains. It feels like if I were to continue one from the middle peak and one from the peak on the right, they will eventually meet somewhere. Okay, so don't keep them too parallel, or don't put them too steep. Quite shallow angle would be better. I think that could be even better adjusted here for me. Okay, and that's will stay there. So from big shape of positioning to tweaking of the silhouettes. Okay, that's better. Excellent. Now we're not going to use this horizontal line all the way under our mountains because the river will be changing that line very much. We're just going to keep it in that V shape, into that valley shape. Okay. But before we come back to our river, we have a nice protruding edge of the mountain here as well. So that lovely rocky section. So I'll put that one, and again, that will give me some gorgeous contrasts later on. And I'll work for its widths and how it's going to slowly develop into different colors. So I'm looking for its darkness and how it's going to slope. That's when I can find out all the areas close to it, maybe just a tiny bit more further up actually. Somewhere here. And we'll have some trees, bare trees in the bottom there, but that's all good. We'll keep them as they are. Be careful with the width of that rock and of the width of the land behind it. Now, if we were to put our river, it will gently curl down. Let's actually put our river now, so then we can compare those spaces. So the river, so this is my horizon line, which I'll be removing very shortly. And the river line is going to go much more lower, and maybe give it a little curl at the bottom here, just to give it a bit more of an interesting shape. It's part of the wall there as well, very exciting stuff, but we're not going to do too much details, but this might be just give us a bit of a banking. And the right bank of the river is going to start, we're going to start seeing it under our rock here, under that central shape of a rock. And let's twist it into a little pool of water. We'll have some extra stones there, big boulders, probably carried by the glacier. Got that nice overhanging segment with some darker plants on top. There's even a little curly bank, but you need to be careful, might be too much details for it, but we'll have a look. And then that river is again going way much more close to us. Might get rid of that curly bank because I think it might take too much attention. Okay, I'll make those lines a tiny bit darker for you again. And there are some sort of, well, because the river is burst its banks, loads of waters, rainwater is dashing its stream. So we have a big chunk of flooded area, maybe somewhere here. Maybe somewhere leading towards us. Again, that would be a nice element for us to work as an entry point to our composition. Okay. I'm not going to look at any of the white water textures on a river, but I might find a little island. There is a little green island. Might be a nice point within the texture of the river. Maybe a couple of stones. So in a way, if you were to draw a road, that's almost like a similar element of in the middle of the road, in the middle of the river or something, somewhere here. We have some protruding rocks. Okay, that one might be a bit bigger rock. Let's have a look at that turn of the river. So it's not going to have that awkward. That's better. Awkward, pointy, triangle edge. So I just turn it to a much more narrow one because it's much more further away, much more flatter valley. And I can remove that horizon line I was talking about in that center part of the painting. Okay. And now let's have a look at some of the rocks. Maybe the water line here might need to be a bit higher. Maybe a little bit higher. I think that's will be slightly better. The left bank I'm just raising by a centimeter higher up. Now I've got the full river, I can see it better. And once I've done my outline of the river, I can work into some other rocks on the left corner. There's a big chunk. There's a big chunk of the rocks going to come in right in front of us. Let's place the top of it. Now the top of it looks higher, or at least the same height as our central pointy part of the mountain there. So I think it's probably, yeah, tiny bit more, even higher. So I'll place it, the dynamics of it, with some lovely steep edges for it. It feels like it's finishing just after this little island we're drawn. So it's protruding quite far. Again, I'm not too bothered about too many details. I was interested in the direction of some of these slabs, but the rest I'll have to leave to work with a brush. I will also roughly plan where it's going to finish and all the rock area and all the rock area around it. So that will make it slightly wider. Okay, all the individual rocks, even if they're quite large, I'm not worried about them. I'm going to leave them out. Okay. And then I'll look for any other diagonals I might need to spot within the mountains. So we have a central area where we're going to have quite a lot of red and orange in color. So there are a couple of lines of light that might help us out if we just plan them slightly, or where some of the darkness is again of some of the rocks will start. Go that shape. There's some more. There's another, almost like a hill shape. Darkness. So I'm looking for the darkness here. For that exciting diagonal, but I think it's gone too high. Let's just drop it a little lower. If I would have been drawing on a smaller paper today, I probably would have paid less attention to the amount of lines I'm putting, because some of them will be lost in the volume of the strokes. But because I'm working on an A2 piece, I think that will be good to have some extra support. I'm still finding out new edges of my tops of the mountains. If you're happy with the tops of your mountains, you don't need to redraw anything. I'm adjusting my composition as I'm sketching further. Okay, so that mountain's gonna come here, but that will be nice foggy edge, and that will disappear into the fog as well. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm using slightly darker marks on with my pencil where my shadows might be coming in, and slightly lighter marks for the other areas. It just reminds me when I'll start painting next to them how much light or how much shadows I need to bring in. Okay, so those will be some of the divisions of the split. So it's in a way, it allows me to, when I start painting, let's say some of these rocks with a sponge, I'll know, oops, I need to roughly stop somewhere here, or I need to roughly change my color somewhere here. Gives me those stopping points, excuse me. I think this rock would have a tiny bit more details on top of it, maybe some more uneven shapes. I think it's breaking down. Okay, maybe some structural changes within that rock. I don't like that straight line, although it is there. I think I'm going to give it a miss. It is there in real life, but I'll give it a miss. Okay, and then the foreground on the bottom right corner. We have a wall which goes right in front of us, but don't like its shape. It's a bit too straightforward. What I do like, I like how the big stones are here right in front of us. What I'm also debating, if I can make my river slightly wider. So if I'll have my front rocks of the wall somewhere about that size, some planning and thinking. Okay, so that might be the shape of some of them here. And one could come here, maybe on the front. And we can do those shapes with our wooden wedge, do some lovely textures on them. So now I roughly know how big they're going to be on this side. Now I can be more brave and extend the volume of my water. I think I'm going to move it further in towards the center of the painting. I think that would be a better judgment. Let's have a look once those lines are removed and replaced by the new ones. So composition wise, it's looking better, although I don't like those two similar shapes. Maybe their widths need to be changed, or maybe something. Maybe turn it to a bigger shape here. Okay, that's better. And by the time I'll put some of the grasses here, maybe another little island, some grass on one of the rocks. I think that will take the other attention away from the similarity of the shapes here. Okay. And let's come back to the wall and the valley. There are a couple of figures in the valley. If you want to place them there, might give you a nice proportion of the how big the people are in comparison to the whole landscape. At the moment, I think I'm going to leave them out, but we'll see if I need something to support the landscape later on. So I'll plan a little bit of color close to the horizon. So that might be some sort of orangey part of the field there. And I think I'm going to plan my wall, maybe give it a slight shape of a twisted line. I think that might be my wall. And now it's become much more wider here. Okay. So if I do a basic shape of it first, I can then add much more rougher edges to it. And the top stones will start looking smaller and smaller. You can work with the darks and highlights with the nail stones, and we'll start painting them. But snaking away. And the edge becomes not so round. We'll start following our shapes of the stones. And now it just disappears into the different grays. And then finally, the big shape of an empty field in the foreground is going to have some textures. So maybe we'll put some grasses there. I'll put them roughly maybe in size, if I just put a couple of shapes, so then I know how much attention. Maybe this one is extra closer to me. Because sheep are doing an amazing job there. They're trimming all the soft grasses, but the other type of plants they leave out because they're very hard to eat. Okay, so some of these ones. The reason I'm doing that, planting some of these grasses, is because I can paint around some of the lighter textures, or paint the lighter textures and then add the darker ones standing out. Okay, and also planning a rough balance of them. Again, I'm working on a larger paper. That planning is more important for the volume of the details I want to have. Okay, quite a lengthy drawing today. We've finally done that. Right, so this is our practice piece now to do a bit of work with a sponge. So I have my smaller sponge here, and I want to work into quite soft and fluffy clouds to build my atmosphere there. Now, to have a bit of depth to the painting, I'm not going to only work in tone, I'm also going to work with some color. So I'd like to use a small amount of orange first, quite diluted, and that's going to be my lightest tones for part of the sky. If I'll use the edge of my paper as my top of my actual piece, so where my sky is going to finish, so I'm going to produce a little bit of extra exaggerated orange, maybe a tiny bit less, or maybe a tiny bit of it with some red. Let me just put a tiny bit of that one there. So it will dry quite pale. Don't know even if you can see it well. Okay, so maybe in some places a bit of orange, maybe diluted pink. And pink is my carmine. Okay. And that will need to dry while I'm loading my sponge with some indigo and one of our blues and one of maybe the blacks. I'm going to make it quite strong. Those colors will dry. So I have some ultramarine here. I'll have some indigo. So if you look out, this is what I do. I'll just put my whole sponge into the paint, and then I'll load it, check it on the palette. Bit of black. Okay. So if I put a sample, that's the type of color probably I'm looking for. Tiny bit of water. I wanted to have it nice and runny. And our darkest area in the sky is going to be more central area. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to work with a lot of darkness for the top. I'm going to introduce some water for the bottom sections here. And I'm going to introduce another layer, maybe soften it with a sponge. And I can top it up with extra dark, more indigo and black. I think I could quite happily go slightly darker somewhere in the top. I'm not going to come close to the edge of my paper because that's my original drawing there. That's quite nice and dark. It will dry slightly lighter. I'm interested in those kind of wacky strokes. And the corner there of my painting, It looks like I've got more blue there. So if I'll go for more ultramarine, that will mix and create me a foggy feel for the mountain. So if we can have one edge of the sponge clean, so that's for smudging areas, for softening edges, and another edge could be loaded with some paint. And then for the lower layers, I'll just go possibly with that ultramarine again and create a few wacky strokes. If I need to soften them, I'll wash my sponge and just give them a gentle blend with existing colors. Okay, so that's the type of approach I'm looking for in our painting. So it's quite a lot of surface covered very quickly. So our river colors will have similar colors to the sky because our water reflects it and there are loads of white water there. So I'll go very similar. I'll go a tiny bit of orange on my sponge. More close to the bottom of the painting, maybe somewhere here, just to have a small hint of that warmth. And the red, the carmine or the alizarin crimson or any kind of pinky red will be good as well to show some of them grassy sections which are under the water. So for example, some of these darker grasses, darker surface plants. So a tiny bit of that might just balance the color of our river. So something like that I'll do in warm colors first. Then I'll wash my sponge, and I'll do very small amount of darks. I'll leave a lot of white spaces, but I would like to do it. If with the clouds, I was trying to smudge some of the edges and have quite soft tones there. I'm going to pick up some of that darker color, so my indigo. I'll work on the river with details with a brush later on. This is just something to add in the big bulk. So I'll use it almost as very precise, sharp edges. So maybe just do something like that. Okay, top of it. Okay, so if I wanted to leave some of the whites, they're there, then big quantities left, maybe close to the bank. I'll put down a bit more something darkness. That's it. So that will be as much I'll do of blue for the river, maybe even less. Maybe something like that there. Okay. And then I'm ready to do my version on actual painting. Right, let's paint the actual piece. So I'll have again some orange. Okay, diluted version of it. I'll put it in a big chunk here. Just make sure that it's has a soft edge, doesn't have any sharp edges. Maybe a nice chunk of it, quite light here. And I have my carmine, pinky, red to introduce a bit more stronger. Maybe over some of these shapes. Okay, the less I wiggle with my brush, the better. I think I've got a bit of hair. Okay, and I want to keep the edges soft. Okay, if any paint settles in, but the pink settled in a bit more abruptly, so I'll just have to paint over it again. Don't want any abrupt shapes. Okay, and I can wash my sponge and load it with some cool colors. So I liked having ultramarine. I enjoyed painting with that. Some indigo and some black. Okay, so if I've got that color on my sponge, it's not overly dark yet, but I need to make it darker. Okay, I'll start with more stronger ultramarine. Just double check I haven't got too much water on my sponge. Okay. I'm going to start from the left-hand side. I'm going to paint over some of these mountains. Okay. I'm going to introduce a tiny bit more water for the bottom. Okay, just to soften the edge. And introduce immediately stronger ultramarine and even stronger black, because I want to have some of that darkness. Okay, coming in here. Some of the diagonal, slightly changed angle I wanted to have. It's a big piece of paper. I could have worked with a bigger sponge. Okay, some more ultramarine for the right hand side of the painting. A bit more darkness here. And then I want to introduce now slightly lighter layers coming in here, softening them with a sponge. Now my mountains will have a nice dark silhouette, so it's okay for me to paint over them slightly unless I've got a dark color. That's when I need to smudge it. And I'm going to create a little bit of light here. And as the paint settles in, I think I'll start introducing gently more darkness in the center. Get some more clouds on the horizon. Let's get some even darker tone. So my indigo, ultramarine, and maybe a bit of exciting darkness from the black. Okay, I'm quite liking that. Just want another maybe smudge. Okay, more color, darkness. So fresh ultramarine. That stroke to be more into the blue. Paper is quite strong to take all that pressure. Maybe a tiny bit. I'll see again how it's drying. I think I'll need a bit more depth of white of the blue. So I'm building up the drama here. The drama. Lovely. I'm happy with that. Right, now let's put some basic tones, some basic washes for our river. Just going to double check that I've got a clean sponge. I don't want any blue on it, as I will start with some orange. Very light version of it again. Maybe even lighter than that. So I just tested it out some. Yeah, okay. Mainly for the lower part. Okay, tiny bit more. Where some of those grasses might be reflecting the color. And a hint of carmine. Again, more the central part of the painting and much gentler. Okay, it doesn't have to be too strong. Might just give us a bit of that color contrast. Okay, I'm going to wash my sponge and bring indigo and black. Payne's gray is fine. Payne's gray is quite blue, which is good. So any of the other blacks would be fine, just to make it stronger indigo type of color. Tiny bit more lighter, I think, for me. And there are some large sections of that color. We said we're going to keep them quite sharp. Coming a little close to this rock, or that could be there. I'm going to try to keep some of those lines more horizontal. Some marks, maybe a bit more here. If I'm not sure, if I'm in doubt, I'm going to leave things out as they are. Maybe something like that for now. So it's a little bit broken looking river, slightly maybe even lighter than I wanted to, but I think I'm happy with that. I'll work with the brush on that afterwards. So if normally we test our colors with a brush, quite a useful flat brush is a smaller one. So for example, if I were to pick up some orange, I'd start practicing my colors like that. Yeah, maybe loading them. This time I want us to practice our colors with a sponge, because our colors will be merging from one to another, and the sponge is the only tool which could provide us with that. So if I'll load my orange with a sponge and work on it, it becomes much more intensive. But it's also, if I dip it in another color, whatever I have in my palette, I think the rest of the indigo, it becomes much more exciting if I pick up some carmine immediately and then mix it almost on a paper. Okay, so I'm picking up some of those yellowy green, some of the reds. Okay, if I don't want it to be too intensive, I can add maybe some more violet to my red and back to some of those colors. Yeah, now that variety of color stays on the sponge. And then we have some darker rocks. I'll pick up some indigo. I've not washed my sponge. I might pick up a tiny bit of black, maybe a tiny bit of water, so it just moves. Okay, too much water. And then I just, if it's too much water, instead of rinsing the sponge, I just take some moisture out of it on a tissue. Okay, tiny bit more color, because that's just diluted it. And some of my darker rocks could come immediately on top of all of that area. Okay, so that's maybe some of the rocks. Some of the other edges might be coming there. And if I want to do some highlights, I'll do them with a brush afterwards. Or if I wanted to have some soft edges, I can do it with the bottom, with the other side of my sponge. Okay, so I want it to be quite bold and abrupt. I want it to be quite strong. Let's say orange too strong, you can just touch it up with a bit of color you have on your sponge. Okay, and then for the river bank, where we've got loads of green, so if I'll use similar orange and one of my lighter greens, that's good come in quite boldly and confidently. And again, I'll immediately start adding some orange, maybe in some places close to one end, and maybe some more coolness by adding some of that indigo into another. Yeah, and then some of the grasses might come up as the surface dries, or as you're still working into them. Or could be a combination. Okay, so that will be my playful work for it. So if you were to be Turner, you'd go very boldly, you will go very quickly, you will work quite spontaneously without worrying too much about shapes, because we have drawn them, so they're there. All you need to think is color, 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 and how you can put it together on that paper, quick and confident. So again, let's okay, I might need to clean my palette here actually first. And I'll start with orange and red, and then move into the cooler colors. So direct orange. If my palette is not perfectly clean, that's okay, because if my orange is not going to stay just pure dark orange, that's fine. It will have some nice connections to other colors, let's say indigo. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that one now. So let's go for this corner. So I'm going roughly around the rocks segments here. Okay, I'll put a tiny bit of that color across and I can see quite a lot of it over the top of the grasses, maybe even stronger orange here. That's a lovely bold color. Quite like that. Maybe I'll bring it elsewhere. Then I'll go for a hint of red, just a droplet of water on my sponge so the color flow a bit better, but it's not runny. The moment it becomes runny, I dab it on my tissue and I work a bit more this concentrated color. So I use tiny bit of orange and red, and I'd like to use it somewhere here in the center. That's a lovely color. So I'm exaggerating that here, and I want to bring a bit more violet to it. So a dab of violet. Just take some of the extra liquid away from it. That would be nice for the rock here, and anything else for the bottom of some of these crumbled stones. Part of the stone here. I don't want anything left white, so I'll just fill that one in. There's a little bit of paler red coming on the top. Leave it there for the moment. And there is similar lovely, gorgeous color. Maybe a lighter version of it. So if I press more on my sponge, some more liquid comes out. And just stay within my lines. There. Something a little bit over my wall. I think that would be quite nice to have a reference to it as well. Stones might have a similar connection there. Right, I can see some of that lovely darker violet-y red could come more intensively at the bottom here, although I can do it with a brush. While I've got it on my sponge, I think I can charge a bit of color here. Okay, if some of it's too sharp, maybe softening some of that. Okay, and then I'm ready to start bringing that indigo and black. Again, I'm not washing a sponge, I'm just working within those colors. A hint of black to it. And let's put those rocks and sketching them almost with some of these straightish, almost vertical lines. Gives me an opportunity to create some of the directions, how the geologically they came out from the mountain. Little marks here. That doesn't have to be, because we can do that with a brush, really. Maybe less is more there. Okay, and another similar color. They're drying out quite light anyway. Don't be scared of introducing the darkness. I want to bring some darkness to this ridge now. And there is a shadow we were sketching. That's will be quite nice. So I haven't done anything to our mountains yet. I'll let these colors to settle, and maybe just sponge gently some of the darkness for the backdrop. So my sponge is semi-dry. Right, I'm ready for the background line of the mountains now. I need to make sure they don't clash in color. Maybe I'll have a bit more indigo now. And I'll start from the top left. Okay, quite a strong silhouette. I'll soften it very shortly. Now I can follow my pencil marks as well. Okay, all that could come in. And I'll smudge the areas where I want it to be much more softer. Okay, just rinsing my sponge gently because I want to bring a tiny bit more orange to the next ridge. So orange parallel to a bit of that violety, indigo-y color. A bit softer. And then again go for that indigo and violet. I think it was more of the red which given that violet actual color. Okay, want a bit more orange in there. And that's when I can start doing my more precise ridge. If you can still see it with your pencil marks, if you can't, you might need to refer to your photograph or even later on tweak it with a brush. I think from here I can go a tiny bit more darker and a tiny bit more stronger into the blue violet color. Okay, my sponge is splitting at the end, which is not the best effect. I'll leave it there for the moment and maybe might use the back of it to get that effect off the page. That's it. And then I can just bring the rest of the color to the whites. That's a lovely effect. Okay, the steps may be slightly bothering me here, but I can work with them by lifting some of the color. Most importantly, the colors are charged, the colors are strong. We can lift some of them if we wanted to, but slightly change the direction of bring tiny bit of variety to them. Just wanted that peak to be slightly different. I can make this one even darker. Well, I could have done that with a sponge or with a brush. Just being slightly impatient. Just shadows as well. That's lovely and exciting. That's lovely and exciting. And it's all working together as well. Okay. So loads of things to go on there, but to be honest, you have to get going with your feel for the painting. The stroke I'll do might come out different to you, and that's when you have to be in charge of your own painting. That's a better one. Right, and all I want to do now is to have some of that yellow and orange, sorry, orange and yellowish green for the foreground. Some of that orange. Okay, a bit more water. That island there. Some more green. Okay, not much water, but if it's not flowing, you need to be careful introducing it. It's okay if it goes over the part of the wall, because it's all part of it together here. Some of these colors, and I wanted to add some more cooler green, so my indigo and my blues and green are going to come together. Oh, this is quite nice. Now finally my sponge is doing what I actually wanted to do. Now this is just a bit of luck, because my sponge is looking old. And when I wanted it a bit more precise and accurate with my ridges, it didn't do that, but with the grasses it's quite effective. And the drags you'll be able to do also with a dry brush, or when the sponge is quite dryish. I just put a tiny bit of something similar here in the matter of marks. Okay, so I need to stay dark. I don't want any light coming in. Where the stones were, I can create some of the big shadows and just cover some of this white. So that wall is done as well. I'll start with some of the darker areas on the river, but I'll work now with a flat brush. So I've got a medium-sized flat brush. I'll need my indigo, and occasionally I'll move into the maybe a bit of violet, maybe a little bit more to the extra gray. And I need to find a bit of depth within my existing grays. So I'll work maybe with two brushes, with flat brush and with a small round brush, which I could just soften the edges off. Okay, so this is just going to be a clean brush, and I'll work to show some of the depths. Coming maybe close to this rock. Being careful not to create too many similar strokes or gaps. So that darker color. Okay, that's off the masking tape, that's okay. Let's go over that rock and not being too intrusive. Maybe it's good to go over the rock. And show the depths. Around it. Okay, gonna let that one dry. And this edge of the rock would be nice and sharp. That's the actual rockiness of it. Bit of sharpness and a bit of softness in some areas. Okay, let's have a look some more. Deeper water, close to this edge. Okay, nice and dark. Okay, so we'll have some of these sharper darks coming in. Okay, maybe a bit too strong. Let's just blend it out gently. Okay, might be enough. There's some more darks gonna come up in the lower part of the river. Just don't want it to smudge, so I'm going to maybe stop there for the moment, come back to it, so I can work at far distance. Okay, maybe a hint of violet, as I said. So then it's more of a kind of reflecting or connecting to our reds. Maybe even coming close to the water, to the wall, to the shore, to the bank. So I'm dragging the brush, creating some of those elongated semi horizontal lines, but they are zigzagging around the river. Okay, around these rocks, I think there's a pool of darkness. And again, I do something what I feels like, okay, I might need to put some darkness in here, and then I compare my marks. Okay, that mark was looking very similar to this one, so I had to go and change its width. The rock here, which will have similar colors, so I can paint that rock. So it doesn't look on its own. Okay, maybe part of the border with the river. We'll have some more sharpening edges there, but just to lower the whites to the water level here. Okay. A little bit more darkness. Yeah, nice texture. Right, let's do the bottom of this segment for the river again. I quite like a dab of violet in it. So I want some of this area to stay in the dark, and some of this area to remain bold with lights. Okay, and this one is now drying much paler than we wanted. So let's give it a quick touch again. I'm going to stop for the river now. Possibly work on it afterwards. I've got some big shapes of the darkness there. I think that's good. Still be dark. Swirling pour water. And that shape looks a bit odd now, so let's cover it with a bit more water so it's not as precise. Okay. Still quite precise. Just soften its edge. That's better. It's now underwater. That's good. That's good, good, good. There were some lovely dark plants on the water edge here. I just block some of them as a reference point for later. Using some indigo, using a little bit of emerald green. Just want to put a darker mark somewhere here without too much explanation. And the same could happen to some of these grasses. Just using the side of the brush. Bring some of the stronger color, or using my wooden wedge. I just need more paint, pigment, more of a pool of water for the wooden wedge to pick up the color. That's nice and not overly precise. Things go slightly bold. We can introduce a smaller brush with some water and just gently persuade it to be less important. The idea of having some of these one a bit stronger. Also, the softening of the edges of the brush just gives us a bit more volume rather than individual. Quite like what's happening here in the foreground. I might just keep it like that. And I want to bring some more texture immediately for my stone wall. I'll go a tiny bit more into the violet and go very quickly some of the edges, violet, green, bit of combination of it. So I'm looking now for some of the shadows, some of the borders of the stone. I can also use the wooden wedge to create some of that texture for us, and definitely in the distance I can see some of my pencil marks, but I can also follow the logic of what they were if you can't. Something's going there in the distance. So it doesn't take overly much attention. It looks quite dark at the moment, but I can see it will be drying lighter. Let's look at this lighter even darker, and let's let it dry, let it settle. Well, I can work with a similar darkness on my edges for the river, and some stones, a bit more sharpening edges elsewhere for the bank. So for example, I can do little marks. Okay, I think that's too strong. So let's just settle some of them. It's that darkness there. But what I'm ending up with quite a parallel smudge. Okay, so if I'll go with a sponge, and just focus on one of them here. Okay, shadow on that rock. Make parts of them. Rocks protruding from the water. Tiny little marks. Okay, and a bit more stronger ones. Maybe for the edge of the bank. Part of that, the meadows, flooded in the water. A bit more sharpness for the opposite bank. Might be a shadow on the rock, might be clustered stones. Just using little lines. Maybe I can even sketch it with my, that's it, that's better, with my wooden wedge. So they become slightly lighter than they come out with a brush. You can also create texture and drag the color in a shape. Okay. Tiny exaggeration of some of them. The shadows, so we can see a ridge a bit more bolder. I also would like to lift some color here. Maybe I'll have some time to touch that. Okay, so there's a little connection now to the background. Very tempting to do lovely little details on the middle background, but we can overwork it very easily. So I'll try to keep it simple there. Okay, tiny bit more darkness on the brush. And let's sharpen it. Maybe this rock. Again, it will dry slightly lighter, so it's not going to appear so black looking, but it will give a nice character. Yes, that's good. So my flat brush is my preference choice here in comparison to a squirrel brush, because it does give us very straight lines, some of that rocky surface. Okay, the wall looks nice and settled. Okay, I can do a bit of a bank here, bit of an edge, and slightly deeper, maybe even more deeper. Water. Okay, that rock needs to stand out a tiny bit more. Maybe I can make my character peak of the mountain tiny bit more exaggerated in its shape. So those are nuances I'm looking for. My two peaks look slightly similar here, two triangle shapes, so I think I'm going to work it to my second one here. Send it forward. Again, immediately better. And then the final stage, I'll use a very clean brush and do a couple of lifting strokes. So for example, someone top of the mountain on the rock here. So the flat brush will do a good job again. Just putting a little highlight and just dropping a little highlight on a slight width of light. Maybe a tiny again highlight. I'd want you to play with them and see where you would need them in your work. I think I don't need many, but if there are crucial places, maybe on top of this red, it just gives that, propels the work even further into the to show that volume. That's nice. And I'll be stopping very shortly. Okay, that's quite lovely. little steps of some sort of lines. Does give the depth to the painting very quickly. For the trees, I could put little tree trunks here and there, just little lines, which will settle in as naturally. And I think I'm done.